Hey, it's Amethyst Virgo. It's been a while since I did an Astrology Explains It All. However, I had a subscriber request to talk about a specific individual's chart, and I'm going to combine the recent controversy with this person. So I figured let me just talk about three high profile topics from the past week or week and a half or 2 weeks or so. So I'm going to be jumping into three major topics: John Morant, Ebony K. Williams, and I'm going to talk about the what happened this week with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle and the car chase paparazzi incidents. So honestly, I had not heard of him until this incident, and actually the first incident that happened with the gun. So basically, if you're not familiar with what's happening, is he's obviously an NBA player. Those of you who are really sports enthusiasts may already know who he is. And so basically, the recent controversy from this week is he was on live and he was in his car or in a car, I believe it was his, with a friend, and he was waving a gun, right, on the live. And, in the NBA, it is very similar in any professional sports. There is a contract. Under your contract, I'm pretty sure what the clauses are in there, because he's not the only player that has been fined. You can be fined for things that you do off the basketball court, right? In professional basketball. And so with that, he's, fined for some games or suspended for some games. I'm not sure if there's a fine as well. I can look that up. But basically, he's in trouble, okay? There's public scrutiny around it. Of course, there are some people like, hey, it's not a big deal. He's registered to have the gun. It's his. And some people who are more on the weight, you are a professional athlete. You need to show a little bit more, restraint in what you show. Now, here's what also is something to note for people who are not aware. This is not his first time showing a weapon in like a social media post type of situation. And so there is more than one reason why some people feel a certain way about this particular situation. And of course, there's always been this debate for a long time about athletes and are they role models. What I found so interesting about his chart is he is Leo, Sun squares Uranus. That is where that tension comes from. One, that Leo energy, his need to be seen and noticed. One, he's in the NBA, so that'll get his need met from that Leo sun. And I'm assuming he's a pretty good athlete as well. I mean, also, he has the 17th degree, which I say the 17th degree I find is one that's always trying to master or be better at something, like has a lot to prove to itself. And also, he has Mars in Scorpio as well. Now, that sun is squaring Mars. So that could be another issue there. But I do think Mars and Scorpio can make someone a pretty determined athlete. So I'm pretty sure he's good on that end. However, that sun squaring that Uranus, the difference between the Leo energy that just is itself, it's not trying to worry about impressing others, whereas Uranus and Aquarius is about the group, it's the collective. I wouldn't be surprised if among his friend group, even maybe younger, if he was kind of like the life of the party or the class clown type of energy. Like he knows how to get attention from people, is what I would say, based on this chart. Again, I don't know. I'm just using the astrology with it because that's what happens when you get Leo and Aquarius in one person's chart. Leo was no longer just self-assured and, thriving off joy and that type of, that popularity. Aquarius is, I now need some type of connection to my community, to my group, to the people around me. And if he is in any way influenced by friends and peers, then that's where you can sometimes get this. I am not blaming his peers for him being suspended twice off his team for flashing the weapon, but I am saying that could be that need to feel like he is a part of something and that he's getting attention for something. And also, I believe it's reading a little bit more about him. He comes from a pretty good area. Like he grew up with both parents. There's not a lot that he has in his background that would show like, some people come into the league and they've had like, they grew up in a really bad area. They had some difficulties, grew up in gun violence and things like that. That is not really his story. And so, there can be some talk from some people around like, well, who is he trying to impress? Like what subgroup of people want to see him with a weapon versus the people that just want to support him as an NBA player. Now, he is relatively young. He's young. He's 23 years old, right? He just, I believe he got into the league maybe, a year and a half ago. So we do have to keep that in mind. Now, I don't think youth is an excuse for many things. There are plenty of players that came into the league even younger than him. I mean, Kobe Bryant came in at 18, right? And he didn't have that image, right? But you have to remember that's a Virgo person, right? Kobe Bryant was a Virgo. And so And that doesn't mean Virgos are, in any way perfect. But I think that, and again, Virgos can get involved in some trouble too. But I do think that on a conscious level, the Virgo wants to, as much as possible, control their image. Whereas Leo, it's about shine, shine, look at me. And that moon, I don't know his degree, I don't know what time he was born, but that sun and that moon energy, that Leo need is not just for, external security, it's for internal security, and it's seeking. And the moon in Leo in any person can become a little bit attention seeking if it's not nourished correctly. So if the natural talents, so I would say John Morant likely has to nurture a lot of things about himself, not just the things he thinks are acceptable to people, but he needs other needs met, especially to try to keep out of these situations here. He did release an apology. He says he understands people are disappointed with him, all those different things that people do when they get called out for something. But one thing I do find is interesting here, some aspects quickly before I move on. He is going through his Jupiter return, and Jupiter just went into Taurus this week. So I do think that's something to note. A Jupiter return is not a Saturn return, right? A Jupiter return is more of, exposure, experiences that you can involve yourself with while you're on a quest for knowledge. So it's not that you're necessarily going through hardships during a Jupiter return. That can sometimes be Saturn, where you're maturing, but Jupiter is about exposing you to different things. And the thing about Jupiter is we're supposed to gain wisdom from those circumstances. Now, with Jupiter and Taurus, you're supposed to take what you have and enhance it, right? This could be beneficial as well for him, but he has to watch out because Jupiter in his chart is in the same sign as Saturn. And though Saturn is, that the conjunct between Jupiter and Saturn in his chart is pretty wide. I wouldn't even say it's a conjunct if it's 12 points apart, 12 degrees apart, but Saturn is very sobering. Saturn is not going to, make things easy for you. And so with this, it's important for him to notice opportunities that he has and use them to his best advantage, because even Nike, I believe Nike is Nike that he has the contract with. They halted temporarily the sale of his shoes or whatever deal he has with them. I believe you can still buy them online, but not in stores or something like that. So this is impacting his money. So he needs to be careful. He does have his Venus. His Venus is trining his Jupiter, which is helpful in terms of him having some smaller investments. It's going to be important for him in general to always have something that's making money even when he's not. That's a very good thing for Taurus to have. But also we look at his Mars is opposing his Saturn, so he can make it and get investments. But Saturn's about the ability to achieve things, so he wants to avoid rash decisions in his youth that are going to impact him later on. Many things can happen to people in sports, right? We already know that some people have injuries and then they're unable to play, and so it's in his best interest, regardless of the situation, to make sure that he's, tending to his business, always having something to fall back on. But if you have not a good reputation, it's going to be harder to have something to fall back on, because people are not going to want to invest in you as much as if you have a slightly better image. So that is important to note. But I would say the main things that's going on with his chart creating this issue for him is that Leo energy, but also that Leo energy that is opposing his Uranus and Aquarius energy, right? That opposition right there creates the perfect storm. That opposition, not only that, the sun squaring Mars as well. So the sun is squaring Mars, the sun is squaring Mars, and the sun is opposing Uranus. Okay, so that's creating some tension and buildup, and then Mars is squaring Uranus. And so that causes like this brash, rebellious energy where sometimes it's like, but it's almost like he knows how to build up to success. Like he knows how to build up Mars and Scorpio, right? But that Uranus and Aquarius need to not be controlled, that he likely has, right? I don't want to be controlled. They can't tell me what to do. They can't tell me what my image is, right? And so again, he's young. Hopefully he's learning his lessons and he's able to, to find other avenues and ways to connect with people on social media. But that's what I would say about his energy there. Energy reading. So I pulled some cards just to get an understanding of I pulled some cards just to get like an idea, like, okay, what's the energy around the situation, right? Like, it's going to keep doing this. Is this his final time? I pulled a card and only had time to pull one card. Got the Ace of Wands. Ace of Wands for those of you that know in tarot, and wands is action. He's not necessarily going to slow down. I don't think he's necessarily going to slow down and just crawl into a corner. Like if you think this one situation is like, okay, he's going to straighten up completely, not necessarily, right? Like he still has that kind of wild side to him. He still has that energy of I need to live life. So that's what I'm getting right now with the energy pull. It's I'm living life. Yeah, he made the apology, but he's not necessarily going to slow down. Now, I'm not going to say that he's going to necessarily do the same thing next week, but if you think he's just going to like stay low, only stay in his house from now on because he's worried about what people are saying, no. And in fact, what he's likely saying behind closed doors, Mercury and Cancer, that's what he really feels. Whoever he's talking to, that's what he really feels, right? Like whoever's in his inner circle knows what he really thinks about this, because he might not feel disappointed. He might be like, look, this, I'm living my life. Why are people on me about this? You know, I'm not the only one with a gun. But at the same time, we have to understand people have a lot of feelings about this because we are living in a nation that has a lot of gun violence, and we are living in a nation where there's just a lot of, you know, people of all ages affected by this. And so it is something to be very wary of, you know, especially as someone who's, you know, early 20s, to really understand that like when you are a public figure and you're showing something that is very polarized right now, like, right? Like this idea of gun control, this idea, like it's a very polarized topic. And so him being aware of those things, like those things are symbols of some of the controversies we have and conversations and the, you know, the political debates that we have within the country. So his energy like reading is, look, we already know, like I put some keywords here when you sometimes see the Ace of Wands, but you understand the Ace of Wands is unstructured, right? It's initiation, beginning. I'm gonna go and do what I need to do, right? You're throwing caution to the wind. So is he going to lay low? I would say no. I don't think, again, I think there's going to be people on his team that are telling him like what not to post moving forward. But I don't think this means he's going to slow down. I don't think this means I don't want to say he hasn't learned his lesson. I don't think this has truly changed him. Let me say that. It's not really changed him or his direction. But, you know, I think if anything, people on his team are going to be a little bit more cautious about what he does than he is. So I wanted to introduce you to Eboni K. Williams. This was actually a subscriber request to talk about her. She's, just to keep it short, she's a lawyer and talk host. However, she also has a book out. She's an author. She's the host of The Griot. She's guest host The View before. She is an executive producer of the Warner Music Group Holding Court with Eboni K. Williams. I guess that's the show. And she's been on a true crime series. So I'm reading this all on her website, ebonikwilliams.com. So she has done a lot in her life and she is, you know, very successful. And so the recent controversy that came about, I believe 2 weeks ago or so, Iyanla Vanzant. So you may remember Iyanla Vanzant mostly from, you know, back in the day. She became really popular because she was on Oprah's show, and Iyanla had a lot of self-help books. And Iyanla had a show that was on the OWN network for many years called Iyanla Fix My Life. Okay. And so that was on OWN, I believe, 8 years, the OWN network. So I don't even know how the conversation came about, who was interviewing who. I'm assuming Eboni was interviewing Iyanla. And basically, the conversation came up. I think they were talking about dating. And Iyanla asks her, well, would you date a bus driver? And Eboni said, and I did watch some of the clips, you know, basically she was like, if he owned the bus. And she just, you know, shared for her, she would not date a bus driver. And again, in the conversation, you know, Iyanla pushed back. And so the conversation became a huge divide on the internet with people saying, wait, why is Eboni telling them they're not good enough if they're a bus driver? And people saying, wait, she makes what, $3 million? She's worth $3 million. She wants somebody that's on the same level economically as her, which many people do most people date within their social class, their economic class. Like most people do in general. That's just what it is. And so it became a huge debate. And of course, you know, these days, any debate with, especially a woman and her standards, becomes picked apart. And, you know, people have their views, their opinions. And then she did further go on to elaborate. She went on the Breakfast Club, and that's, you could all see those views. At the end of the day, let's look at her chart. Well, first thing I see is if someone's a lawyer or was ever a lawyer or in that field, I would look and say, well, is there Libra energy? Is there Aquarius energy? Is there Sagittarius energy? Maybe Capricorn. But when we're talking about someone that wants to seek justice, I tend to want to see air energy or Sagittarius energy. And to do law, you clearly need to understand the law. You clearly need to, and I think with Virgo also is helpful for her because her ability to analyze and pick things apart, and even her defense for why she said what she said, it was really, if you look at how she worded it, that's what you have to understand Virgo energy. She's not just a sun in Virgo, she's a Mercury in Virgo. And so everything she says, whether you agree with it or not, you can tell she's thought a lot about it. And that's one thing you tend to see with Mercury and Virgo is their thoughts are really clear. And some signs don't necessarily have that. Like even me, I'm a Virgo, and a Virgo rising, but sometimes I feel like when I'm trying to explain things to people, not necessarily my videos because I plan them out and I draft, but sometimes when I'm saying stuff to people, directly, it's not always clear if like what I'm saying is exactly what I want to say. And that's also me having Mercury in 12th. But anyway, for her Mercury is in retrograde, which is a whole different conversation. But for her, it works. She sounds very articulate. She's very intelligent. Um, and again, there are people who took offense to her comments. However, when we look at her chart, I'm not surprised she would prefer a partner who has more money or has, I don't even think it's about just the money. I think there's probably something within her that's attracted to men who are in some way on the top. They're in their game. Why? Look at this. Her Venus is conjunct Mars. What she wants and what she desires is matched. Not only that, we look at Mars in Leo, women with Mars and Leo, there tends to be this attraction to men who are either prominent, on top. Some people, it's not just that. It could be the personality type. It could be someone who is um, entertaining, funny, fun-loving, confident type of man. With Venus and Leo, which is how she wants to be appreciated, how she wants to be taken care of. I think there is this underlying need to feel like who she's with can take care of her and the needs that she has. Okay. And again, even if we look here, Jupiter's in Sagittarius. And if we look at Jupiter in Sagittarius, as well, just like the ability to feel like she can do the things she wants to do. If it's traveling, if it's going somewhere, if it's doing something that is really, spontaneous, there's a spontaneous side to her. Perhaps Jupiter is, if we look here, sorry, I have it out of order. The Sagittarius and the Sagittarius should be together. But if we look at the Jupiter and the Sagittarius, those are conjunct. And so there is a side to her that might be a little bit spontaneous, likes to travel, likes to do things that are new, maybe things that are out of the ordinary. And even if we think of people who want excursions outside of their local, realm, like that might require some money. Now, you don't have to be a millionaire to travel. Plenty of people travel every day, but also with her having Saturn and Scorpio as well, there's this attraction to people who invest in themselves, this attraction. And I think one, I don't think that I think people can, date whatever consenting adult you want. This is not about my opinion. There are people who were offended, and there are people who weren't offended. There are people like, look, there are women like, I date a blue collar person, but that doesn't mean I need Ebony to do that. Or people who are like, I am a bus driver, men who are like, I am a bus driver, and that's okay. She can have her opinion. But there were some people like, no, she's disrespecting blue collar workers. And all of that debate. But what I would say here with it, again, without inserting opinions that I may have or whatever the case may be, look at this though. I mean, are you really think that you're going to tell a Virgo woman with Mars and Venus and Leo who to want, right? That's not going to happen. That's it's just not really going to work, right? Like trying to mold her opinion. And Yanla just kept pushing the thought. And I think that the conversation itself was interesting because I don't know if Yanla was asking it in a genuine way, like, trying to, what she was likely going to say. And so in this case, I would say, like, if you think that Ebony's going to change her mind, most likely no. Like she's not going to change her mind. She's not going to budge. This is what she wants. Now again, everyone can have their opinion on whether she can get this person or that person. Or I personally don't think any of us are in liberty to tell somebody what they deserve or what they can or can't get. I don't think it's personally, is it unrealistic for somebody who makes a certain amount of money, because the more, when you make a certain amount of money, you're going to be around those people. Whereas there are women that may not make that same amount of money, and that they might not run in the same circles as Ebony. And so, and again, I don't want to get into the whole conversation about money and who should have more and who's a provider and stuff. That's a whole different conversation that people can have on their own. But when I look here at her chart, even like her, she knows what she needs. I think that she thinks a lot about what she wants, but at the same time, Mercury is in retrograde. I wouldn't be surprised if sometimes like there's certain things that she wavers on. Even with her moon being in Libra, again, I don't have the exact degree. But that moon in Libra, she does seek companionship. I bet you she does. And I bet you she also has a desire for some level of feeling that she can bring some sort of ease in her life. Like she's a big go-getter. But I also think that she likely, with these placements here, even though Leo can be quite generous and all those different, components to it, I think there's also this need of Saturn Scorpio. Saturn Scorpio people. There's tends to be this I need, I it's like I personally, this is Saturn Scorpio. I respect people who have invested and they have what they need. And I respect people who have their own stuff, right? I respect people that can give me something, right? Because remember, Scorpio is about investment. It is about taking, right? If you think of Taurus is making and Scorpio is taking, it doesn't mean Scorpio is not working hard, but Scorpio is investment. Scorpio is eighth house, it's inheritance. So this fear she could have as well about being not wanting to be taken advantage of as well. So that could be a part of why she made this decision, or why she feels this way about her own, her dating life. Venus and Leo, though, I do think with the retrograde in the 23rd degree, she hasn't quite found her person yet. And I think that was also this conversation people were having with, like, well, if she hasn't found the person yet, she should just date whoever wants to date her, right? Like, I think those conversations get a little too much. People get too personally invested in people's opinions. You can't, you know what I mean? Like, it's the average person, the average man can't, are you going to meet Ebony? The average woman, are you going to meet whoever your celebrity crush? Like, I don't know. Like, sometimes I feel like people get really invested in opportunities or things that they're not going to have a chance to do. So it's kind of just like, hey, that's her life, that's the circle she's in, whatever. But I also think, it's interesting because depending on what degree her moon is in, her moon could have a really close conjunct to Pluto. So this desire and want for like all encompassing relationship, marriage. I do think likely she is somebody who seeks partnership, wants partnership, and once she's in it, would really be in it for the long haul type of energy. That's what I'm getting here. Also, North Node in Gemini, 20th degree. Not surprised she's made a living talking, right? Of learning and thinking and having to communicate with people. She is definitely in alignment with, I would say, her North Node. And so I pulled a tarot card about the situation. What was so interesting is I got this judgment card using this deck. And so the image here is over this, but this is a feather and this is a heart. Any of you familiar with Egyptian, ancient Egyptian mythology, knows about Anubis, and just as a myth around, like, when people died, they would weigh your heart and a feather, and if you did good things, you were a good person. The heart should weigh heavier, but if the feather weighed more, that means you were not a good person, and you would not be going to like the afterlife or whatever the case may be. So I do like this imagery on this deck here. But also we want to look at, like, what does this mean? The judgment card in tarot, is this kind of decision. It is balance. It is clarity. It is closure. Consideration. After consideration, a decision is made. I do think with this, we could look at it literally and be like, oh, judgment. Does this mean the judgment that Ebony got from other people? But more so, it's about the judgment of being clear. Once you make a decision, you weigh the pros, the cons, the balances. Do I think she might have come out of this situation with a different way of speaking about this topic? Perhaps. I feel as though this likely is not gonna. This is not gonna be the last time this comes up. Probably in some way, shape, or form. Like, her name is going to be mentioned when people talk about like standards and women having standards in dating and things of that nature. Like, I wouldn't be. It's not. Once it dies down, people still use people as examples of things, right, all the time. But I do think within this, it's like, I do think this gave her time to think. I do think sometimes we do have to be challenged about what we want to confirm what we want, if that makes sense, right? Like, sometimes people may have this kind of wavering, wavering tendency of like, well, maybe I should just. But I think for her, it's very clear that she's not backing down. She's not changing. Do I think that maybe she has changed her mind about how to handle this or approach this topic, perhaps? And maybe she, she has had some type of like second thought about like, why wouldn't I date a person with this profession? Like, what is it that I'm looking for? And I also wonder if like, even though she's still going to date, in the tax bracket she wants to date in, there are some other conversations that have been had with her that have helped her kind of clarify some other things that maybe the money is not negotiable, but maybe other parts of someone's character, other parts of someone's traits are negotiable. But for the most part, see the judgment card. It is what it is. Like it's like a clarity, it's a decision, it's balance. It's like it's there. Once you've weighed the options, you are then like set on your journey. I want to talk about this recent story with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, and I have her mother pictured there because her mother, Doria, was also in the car with them at the time. So I did want to address that. And so basically, the news reported as a near catastrophic car chase. As we know, paparazzi go crazy when they see famous people, and so but famous people do not usually like it. You do have famous people that call paparazzi, but for the most part, it is annoying to celebrities, famous people, people who are of high profile. And so, why is this a big deal? This is a big deal because his mother, Princess Diana, was killed during a paparazzi chasing after the car she was in. And, that's everyone knows this, and so this probably triggered some memories for him, and it just also seemed eerily similar to what happened with his mother, Princess Diana, back in the 90s. So I am going to show you some chart. So I pulled up Prince Harry's chart, and I pulled up the transits for the time. So as we see, his birth chart is in the middle, and then we see here that his transits are, showing where everything was the night that this occurred. I just put 11 p.m. because that's the time they were picked up, so the transits would stay the same. And the moon was in Aries at the time. The moon in Aries, in general, when the moon is in Aries, we do want to look at aspects, but in the general, I do see sometimes a lot of feelings of unrest during this time. The moon has to be in a sign that is rather aggressive, that is very impatient, that is very self-driven. And so sometimes you can see people even going for what they want during that time. I do notice sometimes there's even more aggressive driving just in general during the moon in Aries. And so with the moon being in Aries, what I find interesting about this transit is that it's in Harry's third house. The moon is transiting the third house. And why is that important, astrology buffs? Because the third house is the house of travel, short-term travel. Now, they're not based in New York, I don't believe, right now. I know they had a home in California. So what's interesting, though, is the moon being in the house deals with vehicles, deals with travel, deals with, very urgent travel, immediate travel. And so even Mercury is in the third house that night, Mercury and Taurus. And so there could be some feelings and struggles with safety, feeling safe. Even we look at what's happening within his chart, all of this literally is opposing his ninth house, which has Pluto and Saturn in it natally. Those are serious planets. And so anytime we have planets that are serious being opposed by other planets, sometimes it can cause a situation, an event, or an incident. Now, am I saying that this was meant to happen that night? Not necessarily, but I do think based on where the placements are in the third house and his natal chart, this could indicate themes happening with vehicles and cars and short-term travel at the time. Is that right? If that makes sense. Also, even with the moon, when the moon is traveling from the third house, the fourth house, a lot of times the fourth house is more of our memories, but the third house is early childhood. Okay. And so anything from the early childhood that we can find sometimes is immersed, not just in the fourth house of family and emotions, but third house of our early socialization. And look, his moon, the moon represents our feelings, our emotions, but also it represents mother. And so even like that 24th degree Pisces, okay, the paparazzi and just like what feelings that could have evoked. Now, that's all that I'm really going to note. I mean, the sun being in Taurus, what's interesting also is the sun is conjuncting the moon, at this time, his natal moon. And so interesting, even the 25th degree, which is an Aries degree, the degree system that I use, and even being conjunct Uranus could mean like being stirred, being in the public eye sun, but also how it is being shown through some sort of emotional or some type of triggering incident, right? Like think about it, if he, I'm sure, there's some type of fear, when you're getting, feel like you're chased by the paparazzi, and just how his mother passed away from the same type of situation. And so that is important to note there. Also, I'm not surprised Mars and Cancer, it's in the seventh house transiting. Not that that's a bad thing, but with Mars transiting Cancer, what stands out is Mars in Cancer is a Mars doesn't like being in Cancer. Now it's it seventh house is partnerships, so this can be showing like a way in which um something he shared, obviously him and Megan, her mother was there as well, but like some type of conflict within the relationship. But doesn't always have to mean people are in conflict with each other. Sometimes a conflict in a relationship is something outside of the relationship that impacts two people. 27th degree is publication, something that's high profile anyway. And so again, like this is just a quick way to look at this. Now, for Megan's transit during this night, as we can see, what I find interesting is Mars is conjunct her natal ascendant, like her Cancer ascendant. Mars is traveling there, and it can promote some type of like responsiveness. Mars being the first house, reactiveness. Like I think that she's likely someone who feels like she's kind of on the defense now. I don't think that's the only thing that she likely would have experienced with Mars transiting her first house. She likely would have experienced many different things, but of course, we don't know with celebrities. Well, some of you may, right? Like, we don't know what's going on in their household and their daily life. So I do want to keep that, put that in there as well. Of like, this one incident doesn't fully chronicleize her Mars transit, the Mars transit to her first house, but Mars conjunct the ascendant could mean these are she's feel like she has to respond to a lot of things, feel like she has to do a lot of things in order to protect herself or her image or her family. I wouldn't be surprised. Also, the moon is in Aries again, of course, that night. And so what we see here, anytime we have energy that directly conjuncts the midheaven or is in the 10th house, that can mean high profile image, seen, being noticed, having situations happen that can be kind of startling. If you look here, her moon is in Aries, but it's also opposing Pluto at that same night. Her natal Pluto and Libra partnership. What do we say? Libra. When we looked at Harry's, we saw that he had seventh house energy in there. So a lot of times overlaps in astrology can happen not just with signs but houses. So he had Mars and Cancer in the seventh house in his chart transiting. She has Pluto in Libra in her natal chart, right? And so both have this theme of Libra or doing something with your partner or something impacting your partner as well. And again, the impact is from an emotional lens. But then if we look at the moon opposing Pluto, it can mean things that are difficult resurfacing, right? Something that is emotionally responsive, moon in Aries, that's the transit, but it's impacting Pluto and Libra, her emotional state and her sense of security, right? Pluto being in Libra can also mean feeling like there's a kind of deep type of wound or something to heal. And so I think their reaction is appropriate for them. Of course, I'm like, if you're not someone who's constantly being, chased with cameras, you probably don't have that same sense of urgency that they may have. So I do think sometimes we have to stop. I know with celebrities, people sometimes have this kind of like irrational dislike or hatred for famous people because you think, oh, they have it easier than me. So like, but it doesn't mean that they're less human, and they do also have the right to fears and concerns as well. And lastly, pull the energy card for the situation with them. Knight of Swords. Now we know knights carry messages. And so with this, I think the result of this incident is going to make them even more cautious, more on edge, and likely something is going to change. Like, okay, next time we do this, we have to do it like this. So they did have security with them. They always travel with security, but even like there's going to likely be some small tweaks. Like, okay, next time I need this happening. I need this happening. Thinking, planning, think about that when you're thinking of Knight of Swords. Someone is on a mission. So it's not just them saying, oh, we need to change something. I bet you the day after that happened, they likely got with their security team and something was changed. Something is going to be done. So they demanded the photo agency, the paparazzi company, hand them over to them. And so what was interesting is the photo agency rejected it. And the photo agency said, in America, as I'm sure you know, property belongs to the owner of it. So it's almost like a little jab, right? Because you know, in the UK, if this had happened, Harry would have the right to demand, as royalty, you're going to give me those photos. And I'm not saying that's how he would say it, but if these people, this agency, they're like, we're not giving you the photos that we took that night, right? Because I think the photos will also help them likely see, like, how close were these people? Like, were they putting their lives in danger? I believe the photos would help see that. But I don't know. They're going to probably get to go sue them for the pictures because technically, yeah, like without a court order or something, they don't have to hand the photos over. But the issue is, like, it was a near catastrophic car chase, is what they're saying. And so they're probably going to have to sue them. But that's why I think this Knight of Swords is showing this is not over. Harry and Meghan did not just go to bed and say, you know what, that was a close one. No, they likely are going back to figure out, we want the pictures, we want better security protocol. This is not going to happen again. So that's where they probably are there. So I did want to share, this video is not at all sponsored by anybody, but this is the deck that I used. I really like this deck, and some people who are into tarot, you might want some new ideas. It's called the This Might Hurt deck. It is available on Amazon. I checked, but I got mine from Barnes and Noble. So again, just wanted to share just something, for people that are interested in tarot if you're looking for a new deck.